This Concerned Waterways Alliance presentation looks at the Latrobe River and the Gippsland Lakes as a single connected living system. At a continental scale, Australia is the driest inhabited continent on Earth. In southeastern Australia, climate change is already reducing rainfall and inflows into our rivers. That decline is placing increasing pressure on waterways, wetlands and estuaries, all of which depend on reliable freshwater to survive. Gippsland is often seen as water-rich. In reality, its rivers are among the most heavily regulated in Victoria. Urban water supply, irrigation, power generation and mining all compete with the ecological needs of its waterways, often leaving the environment last. This is Lake's entrance, showing the narrow opening connecting the Gippsland Lakes to Bass Strait. Home to around 9,000 people, it is a major regional tourism hub, and the lakes are the habitat of an endangered species of dolphin unique to southeastern Australia. The Gippsland Lakes form Australia's largest coastal lagoon system and are protected under the Ramsar Convention for their international ecological significance. They support rare and extensive wetlands, critical fish nursery habitat, migratory waterbirds and deep cultural values, all of which depend on adequate and reliable freshwater inflows. A particularly important reason for their Ramsar listing is their role as a drought refuge for waterbirds from the Murray-Darling Basin. During inland droughts, birds move east toward temperate coastal wetlands in search of refuge. When the Gippsland Lakes were listed in 1982, they represented the largest area of freshwater coastal wetlands in this corridor. That is likely no longer the case. The loss of freshwater extent and function now threatens the very values the Ramsar listing was intended to protect. To the east, the Tambo, Nicholson and Mitchell rivers flow directly into Lake King. Together they deliver freshwater sediments and nutrients from their catchments into the lake system. To the west lie the rugged Avon River and the Latrobe River. The Latrobe River is the single largest freshwater contributor to the Gippsland Lakes. It flows into Lake Wellington, supported by major tributaries including the Thomson and McAllister rivers. The broader western Latrobe catchment also includes the Tyers, Tangell, Moe and Morwell rivers, as well as Tarraugan Creek. Over time, these rivers have been dammed, diverted and heavily extracted from, fundamentally altering their natural flow patterns. Scientific assessments show the Latrobe River now operates with a significant environmental flow deficit, meaning there is no longer enough water to sustain river health. Mount Baw is a critical headwater region. From here, 4 major tributaries descend towards the Latrobe River. The Thomson Dam, with a capacity of more than 1,000 gigalitres, represents about 60% of Melbourne's total water storage capacity. The Thomson supplies Melbourne with up to 170 gigalitres of water each year via the Thomson Yarra Tunnel. The tunnel is over 35 kilometres long and travels half a kilometre under Mount Gregory. It feeds the Upper Yarra Reservoir, ultimately supplying homes and businesses across much of the city of Melbourne. Lake Glenmaggie regulates flows in the McAllister River and supplies water to the McAllister Irrigation District, which lies between the Avon River and the Latrobe River. The McAllister Irrigation District is supplied through 2 large upstream offtakes, the Northern Main Channel and the Southern Main Channel, which in turn feed a network of smaller channels and irrigation lines. The main Eastern Channel offtakes at a weir further down the McAllister River. The McAllister Irrigation District covers more than 50,000 hectares and typically uses around 150 gigalitres of water each year, underpinning Australia's largest dairy-producing region by volume and irrigated agriculture. While this supports a highly productive landscape, the storage and diversion of water intercepts flows that would otherwise reach the Latrobe River and the Gippsland Lakes. In parts of this district, reliance on flood irrigation remains a concern. This method is comparatively inefficient, with losses to runoff, evaporation and deep drainage. Flood irrigation mobilises nutrients, particularly nitrogen and phosphorus, which are carried through drains and waterways into downstream rivers and lakes. While improvements are underway, nutrient export remains a major system-wide issue, contributing to algal blooms and declining water quality, especially as freshwater inflows continue to fall due to climate change. The Blue Rock Reservoir on the Tangell River is another major control point, storing water for many users, including power generators, local townships and irrigators. Less than 3% of the capacity of this reservoir is devoted to environmental flows, which are managed by the Victorian Environmental Water Holder. An allocation of water from the Blue Rock Reservoir is piped to the Mundara Reservoir on the Tyers River, which is managed by Gippsland Water to meet urban and industrial needs. Lake Narrackan captures flows from the Latrobe River, with 80% of its storage set aside to support power generation in the Latrobe Valley. We now arrive at the Latrobe Valley coal mines, Yallourn and Hazelwood, and then Loy Yang to the east. The Hazelwood mine has ceased operating and is starting to be filled with water. Both Yallourn and Loy Yang are slated for closure in coming years. The proposed method for rehabilitation is to fill them all with water. This is generally regarded as the cheapest rehabilitation option, but one that will take vast quantities of water to complete, involving amounts well exceeding the capacity of all of Melbourne's major water storages combined. The Morwell River once flowed naturally through this landscape, providing extensive habitat and contributing fresh water to the Latrobe system. Mining has progressively threatened to sever that connection entirely. At Hazelwood, the Morwell River was diverted around the western edge of the mine. In 2011, engineering failures caused subsidence in the northeast section of the mine. At Yallourn, the Morwell River has ended up stranded between two enormous mine pits, and here it is in an even more precarious position than at Hazelwood. This view shows the Morwell River perched above the conveyor belts moving coal between the pits, an image that captures the fragility of these engineered systems. It was here the Morwell River diversion catastrophically failed in 2012. Floodwaters entered the open-cut mine, forcing emergency discharges of contaminated water back into the Latrobe River. A similar failure was only narrowly avoided in 2021. These diversions illustrate a critical point. Engineered rivers are inherently fragile. Without substantial long-term investment during mine rehabilitation, their instability creates unacceptable risks for both waterways and downstream communities. Failures at either one of these pits will potentially see the Morwell River being terminated at a pit lake, forever disconnected from the Latrobe River, except in a rare flood year. Again, at Loy Yang, rehabilitation proposals will require a vast quantity of water. Loy Yang's pit is around 1.5 times the volume of the massive Thomson Dam shown earlier. Combined, all three mine pits represent the volume of 4 Sydney harbours. Once filled, even under best case scenarios, evaporation alone from pit lakes would permanently remove around 15 gigalitres per year from the Latrobe system. For more than a century, coal-fired power generation in the Latrobe Valley has released thousands of tonnes of heavy metals and other toxins. Much of this pollution has settled across the catchment and ultimately entered the region's waterways. Most starkly, dolphin deaths downstream in the Gippsland Lakes, and potentially linked to PFAS or mercury poisoning, exposed the system's vulnerability to toxins. Downstream, at Lake Wellington, lie numerous internationally significant wetland reserves, including the Hart, Dowd and Clydebank morasses. Here we see the impact of upstream and downstream decisions written onto the landscapes. These systems were once predominantly fresh. Today they are suffering from salinity intrusion and widespread vegetation dieback. Lake Victoria and its surrounding wetlands, including Red Morass and Morley Swamp, are similarly significant. These systems also depend on flood pulses and freshening flows that are increasingly stripped away upstream. While saline intrusion from downstream has combined to again leave a clear ecological mark with algal blooms and vegetation dieback now a feature. Nowhere is this decline more starkly illustrated than at Lake King and the Mitchell River silt jetties. This amazing river delta feature shows how rivers naturally shape and sustain lake systems over thousands of years. Reed beds and other shoreline vegetation would normally stabilise the outer banks to allow these unique silt jetties to protrude far into the lake. Landforms such as these depend on sediment transport and variable flows, processes that are weakened when rivers are over-regulated. Here, compared to 2004 satellite imagery, we can see significant vegetation loss along the shoreline, accelerating erosion of this important natural feature that has taken thousands of years to form. We return to Lake's entrance, where engineering decisions have reshaped the entire system. Since the early 2000s, dredging has deepened the entrance channel from about 2.5 metres to 5.5 metres. This more than doubled tidal energy and speed, forcing marine water deep into the lakes. The result was a rapid shift from a fresh brackish lagoon to a predominantly marine system, a change acknowledged by regulators. The ecological cost has been severe. Loss of shoreline vegetation, collapse of benthic communities, accelerated erosion and contamination risks. Seen together, the Latrobe and Gippsland Lakes form one connected living system, shaped by every decision made upstream and downstream. The ecological decline we see at the lakes is neither accidental nor inevitable. If rivers, lakes, mines, irrigation networks and infrastructure continue to be managed in isolation, the system will continue to unravel. These are not separate assets or competing interests. They are one system requiring a number of critical interventions. First, we need to restore freshwater inflows by identifying and returning real volumes to the Latrobe and its tributaries, backed by enforceable recovery targets. Second, we must rebalance consumptive demands, strengthening extraction limits during low flow periods and winding back over-allocated entitlements that prevent even minimum ecological flows. This must include reconsideration of the volumes earmarked for creating pit lakes at the 3 mine sites. Third, at lake's entrance, dredging decisions must account for system-wide consequences, including salinity intrusion, shoreline erosion, wetland loss, and the shift to a more marine system. Dredging must be guided by ecological thresholds and capped to avoid further damage to Ramsar-listed values. The catchment must be governed as a single living entity with coordinated planning across agencies and a requirement to assess cumulative impacts, not isolated approvals. The question is no longer whether change is needed, but whether these actions will be taken in time to protect the ecological values for which this system is internationally recognised and on which communities, culture and wildlife depend.